Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending. This is a subcommittee for human rights. I'm going to introduce all the members behind me. We're going to give you a report today about some of the findings that we've discovered from hearing from witnesses on Burma. Just so you know, there's the Human Rights Watch report that's going to be over here, as well as current maps of Burma and Myanmar. To my left is Russ Hiebert, MP, and then Wayne Marston, MP, the Honorable Irwin Cotler, and Dr. Humphreys and his wife Cow-In. They'll all be addressing you this morning. My name is David Sweet, MP, and I will leave it now to Russ Hiebert to begin the statement about Burma.
Thank you, David. As stated, my name is Russ Hiebert, and I'm a Conservative Member of Parliament on the International Human Rights Subcommittee. While we are all pleased with the modest improvements that have been made by the Burmese military dictatorship in allowing some democratic freedoms in Burma, including allowing some opposition members such as Aung Sang Suu Syi to take seats in the Burmese parliament, things are not so good for the people of the mountain states of Burma. In fact, the 2 million people of Kachin State were denied the right to participate in the recent election. Aung San Suu Kyi herself, in a speech she gave earlier today in Bangkok, warned the world against the, quote, reckless optimism over the reforms that are happening in Burma, stating that they are not irreversible. And she said that the Burmese parliament is far from democratic. This past month, we've heard testimony, graphic testimony, in our committee about the horrific treatment of the indigenous people of Kachin State in Burma. We have heard from credible eyewitnesses who have seen the brutalization of the population firsthand. We have testimony from groups such as Canadian Friends of Burma, Human Rights Watch, the U.S. Campaign for Burma, and Physicians for Human Rights, as well as a Burmese national who also testified in camera. Based on the evidence we have heard, it is clear that the Burmese government is engaged in a program of persecution in Kachin State and several other states against the various ethnic and religious minorities that live in these parts of Burma. The evidence we have heard is compelling. Hundreds of thousands have been displaced from their villages and forced to flee to neighboring countries. Another 75,000 that we know of are internally displaced. Rapes and killings are commonplace. Places of worship are routinely burned down, and worshipers are arrested and detained for months with no charges being laid. The military, which is not under the control of any elected official in Burma, appears to be the prime instigator of this program of ethnic and religious persecution. I note that even the president of Burma has called on the Burmese military to remove itself from Kachin State, but this civilian official has no control over the military. While the world's attention is focused on Burma because of the modest improvements made in allowing the opposition into parliament, we want to draw the world's attention to the atrocious and unacceptable human suffering that is happening in the states far from the Burmese capital. So as Canadian MPs, we condemn the actions of the Burmese military in continuing this program of ethnic and religious persecution. Thank you.
I'm Wayne Marston. I'm the NDP human rights critic and the Member of Parliament for Hamilton East Stony Creek. Further to what Russ has just said, Amnesty International has stated publicly that hundreds of political prisoners remain behind bars in Myanmar. Russ also indicated that the civilian authority, the government, has no real control over the military there. And outside of the conflict zones that he's referred to, ethnic Muslim minority Rohingyas, primarily in the northern Rakhine state, continue to be subjected to human rights abuses. They are still not recognized as citizens and are subject to systemic discrimination in marriage, travel, and employment. Particularly concerning is that despite being a state party to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, Myanmar continues to deny Rohingyas children the right to nationality. Additionally, Amnesty has received reports concerning land grabbing, forced evictions as part of large-scale industrial, extractive, or infrastructure projects such as the Dawei Industrial Port and the Shawa Gas Pipeline. Burma's military and the Kachin Independent Army both use landmines, which do not discriminate between combatants and civilians, and it will also complicate the safe return of those displaced parties that have had to leave their homes. And concerned governments should support an independent international mechanism to investigate abuses of all sides, as they should in any conflict, and pressure should be sustained on the Burmese government to ensure that the military is actually brought into line following the directions of the Burmese government. And until that happens, you're not going to see effective change in Burma. Thank you very much.
Mon nom est Irwin Cotler, je suis député de Montréal dans la province de Québec. Je suis très heureux d'être ici avec mes collègues aujourd'hui à l'égard de cette cadre d'urgence. We have heard, as my colleagues have said, moving, riveting testimony about, and Human Rights Watch calls it unspoken, untold miseries. I would say almost untold horrors in Burma, particularly since June 2011, a pattern of beatings, rape, murder, burning of villages, assaults on indigenous people simply because of their beliefs or their indigenousness and the like. And I'll allow this witness testimony to be better put forward by those who appeared before us who will immediately follow me. Suffice it to say, as my colleagues have said, that we need to sound the alarm here. There is a lot, and rightly so, about what has been happening in Syria in the crimes of humanity that have taken place there since March 2011. Interestingly enough, but disturbingly, during almost the same year, but dating from June 2011, there's been nary a mention anywhere in the world media about what is happening to the Kachin people and to the assaults taking place in the Kachin state. So at this point, we have come here not only to raise our voices, not only to sound the alarm, but to call upon the international community to act, and my colleagues have given some specific recommendations that need to be done. I would urge you to just look to page 21 of the Human Rights Watch report. It summarizes their key recommendations. I need not take any more time to go into them other than to say that those who have been engaged in these crimes of humanity and massive violations of international humanitarian law have to be held accountable, and the Burmese government has to ensure that those who are engaged in such acts in the Burmese army and the like are brought to justice. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dr. James Humphreys, and this is my wife, Colwyn Humphreys. We have spent a number of years over in the country of, as you know, Burma or Myanmar, and we have been had the opportunity to work together with the committee here to share about what's going on in the country. I just want to read you a statement here. Atrocity would be the right word to describe what is taking place this very day in Myanmar, and especially among the Kachin people. For years, the Burmese military leaders have carried out crimes against their people, subjecting them to severe persecution. For example, the Kachin, like many other groups, are undergoing horrendous hardships. They are now over 75,000, and I was told today it has now increased to 80,000 internally displaced people that the United Nations and many other NGOs cannot get permission to help. The military regime who crafted the new constitution and handpicked most of the 600 members of the new parliament are behind most of these atrocities. The military is allowed to continue working and living outside the law and outside the will of the people. The military has successfully written a constitution that protects them and gives them the right to suspend the parliament and even the constitution itself if they perceive an external or internal threat to the country. Plus, it keeps their arch rival, Aung San Suu Syi, from ever running for or becoming the country's president. The military regime, with a blind eye from the new government, are carrying out atrocities against the Kachin people. I would like to ask the citizens of the world, do you have to wait again until there are numerous mass graves before we will take some type of action. The Army has destroyed over 150 villages, burned crops and churches, and maimed and killed many civilians. They have sent over 75,000 people fleeing to the mountains, into the capital city of Myitkyina, and to the camps along the China border, fearing their extreme brutality of the Army. There is barely enough food and medicine and shelter to care for them. Plus, those unfortunate who stay back with their homes undergo the horrendous raping of their women, and their children are being turned into slaves and porters. The men and youth are being forced to become soldiers, and if they don't go and fight, they face interrogation and extreme torture. The Burmese army is constantly shelling and bombing villages with no care for the people. Plus, they often use the villages as human shields to protect themselves against the Kachin Independent Army. The president of Myanmar has told the army 2 times to withdraw their troops, but instead they have moved in more tanks and artillery, helicopters, soldiers into the fighting zone. They are not going to stop until they rid this resource-rich land of its people. All this because of 2 main reasons. 1, the people do not support a constitution that doesn't support federalism. Even Aung San Suu Syi stated, if you put on a scale of 1 to 10, the people's understanding of federalism, it would be a 1. Secondly, there needs to be freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the judicial system, and freedom to vote and hold office by all citizens. If we are to see a strong federalism, these principles must become part of the foundation of the country if there is to be any kind of hope for democracy. Our hope is to get the media to start recording and publishing what is actually taking place outside of the capital city and to bring to the world's attention these terrible crimes against humanity, like they did with the countries of Libya, Egypt, Syria, and now we hope with the country of Myanmar. I implore you to please help the Kachin people of Myanmar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience in listening to the troubling and grave concerns in Burma. And the members of the Subcommittee for Human Rights, as well as Dr. Humphreys, will be ready to take any questions that you have.
We do know that, we've seen a tremendous pace of reforms. Canada suspended last month a number of sanctions. We're also seeing what's expected to be a bit of a resource rush now that a lot of international sanctions are lifted in Myanmar or Burma. Are you concerned that the resource rush will overtake any human rights violations in the country?
In that speech I referenced by Aung Sang Suu Kyi that she made in Bangkok earlier today, she makes reference to the fact that there are tremendous resource opportunities for foreign countries, but she's concerned that the Burmese people will be left outside of that, the benefits that would accrue from that, and she implores international companies and investors, in particular investors, to keep that in mind and to focus on opportunities that would empower the Burmese people, including providing them with the kind of education that they need to benefit from those kinds of investments.
What responsibility does Canada have in this?
I'm not speaking for the government here, to be very clear before I start. I'm with the official opposition, and in the past, in this Parliament, we've had motions before Parliament, bills before Parliament about corporate and social responsibility, and that's an area we're going to have to continue to look at within Parliament and to recommend strongly to our various companies, the extractive companies in particular, that go into foreign countries and may well take advantage of the situation in Burma, to keep in mind the needs of the country, the needs of the people of the country, the democratic needs and the human rights needs.
Like Mr. Marston, I'm of the opposition, but of the third party in the opposition. But let me just say that on this point, we are all here in common cause, and we have sought within our parliamentary process and framework to shine the spotlight on what is happening in Burma, and to do so through our hearings in our Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on International Human Rights and Development. But I have to say that sometimes when the media asks, what are we going to do? I want to put that question back to the media. What are you going to do? because I have not seen in the media any reporting about, as Human Rights Watch said, these untold miseries, and I would say untold horrors. So I think that the media also has a responsibility, and I'm delighted that you are here today, and I hope that we will see the witness testimony that we've heard today from Dr. Humphreys, that this will find expression, because governments very often act only in relation to how they perceive this to be a priority in public opinion, in the political culture, and the like. If there's no reporting by the media, it's almost as if it is not happening. So while we have been properly focusing on the horrors in Syria, as I say, I haven't seen a line on the horrors in Kachin. And I hope we will see the beginning of the media involvement in this. I'm not asking the media to become advocates. I'm just asking them to do their job and report on the untold horrors that are going on, the unspeakable horrors that are going on, and maybe that will help get the government to act, and we parliamentarians will continue to undertake our responsibilities in this regard.
Do you think the government in Myanmar has control of the military? I didn't really understand where. Anyway, I'll just leave that question as it is.
It may seem on the surface that the government is in control, but the way the new constitution is set up is that the commander-in-chief still has quite a bit of control, if not the ultimate control. And so what takes place is that even though the president of the country may insist that we go one way with dealing with certain things, in the northern states and in the mountain areas, it seems like the military regime continues their own control. That's why I was stating in here, the military, the Constitution is set up in such a way that it actually protects the military and the commander-in-chief and gives him the ultimate authority in picking the parliament, the 200 seats that are in the parliament, which are the military's representative, and has been involved in also the other, say, 350 seats, heavily involved in the selection of the parties that could run, so that when the people vote, those people that are being voted for are also ex-military people. So you've got about 525 seats that are all lined up with the military. So you can imagine which way this is going to go. And so when it comes to making decisions, and we're concerned about some of the things that are going on in the country right now with concerning the protests that are happening concerning electricity. I don't know if you've heard that. The protests are getting larger and larger every day, and now they're protesting about wages in the capital city and in the city of Mandalay. And it will be interesting to watch to see how the government on one hand works with these newfound opportunities of protesting, or whether the military will just step in like they have numerous times before and crush it. So I would say right now the military is in control, but they're doing it in such a way. They want our resources. They want, or not our resources, but our finances, our blessing, if you want to call it that, to become more open. And they're hoping that we will remove our embargoes all around so that they can have more freedom to do what they've been doing for hundreds, or I can say hundreds of years, but for at least, that's a misquote, but for at least a number of years that they've been doing this kind of activity.
Just a little bit further directly to your question, witness testimony at our committee has said at least on 2 occasions the president called for the army to be removed from Kachin province, and they haven't followed that direction.
And how hopeful are you about the reforms that we've seen?
Well, I'm skeptical. I think we're early on. Even the government statement, if you consider what Minister Baird had to say, he did say that should the situation in Burma deteriorate, Canada stands ready to impose sanctions again. So we're monitoring the situation. I think on the face of it, it appears that there's tremendous progress occurring. And I think that's in part why Aung Sang Suu Syi this morning was calling on the world to not have reckless optimism about what's happening, because the tendency so far has been for the media to portray everything as going in the right direction, when, as we've heard over this past month from witness testimony that things are not going in the right direction in the rest of the country, specifically in the Kachin state, where so many people are being persecuted, killed, and so I think we have to wait and see how the military responds, and if there's any public pressure for them to be held accountable or to withdraw. So that's why I say I'm skeptical.
I think Russ Hiebert, in referring to Aung San Suu Kyi's statement about guarding against reckless optimism, false optimism, I think that what is happening in the Kachin state we should look at as a case study and advise the Burmese government and the military that we are going to see this as a case study as to whether there is genuine progress going forward. That we're not only going to look in terms of the urban areas, but we want to see what is happening in the Kachin state. And to that end, we need to call upon the Burmese government and the Burmese authorities to cease and desist from all their violations of international humanitarian law and to bring the perpetrators to justice. And as my colleagues have said, to see that an independent investigative mechanism through perhaps the United Nations Human Rights Council is established with a view to having an ongoing monitoring and accountability mechanism that will go to the Kachin state, that will be able to report back to the international community. And in relation to that, we will be able to judge what we are going to do with respect to our sanctions policy, whether we will reinsert the sanctions. And as Minister Barrett said, we are keeping a watching brief, but we will use what is happening in the Kachin state and to the Kachin people as a case study for our overall foreign policy determinations.
I'll conclude our press conference now. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll bring back to the office.